Well, for more on today's road traffic safety awareness launch by President Cyril Ramaphosa, we're joined in our Pretoria studios by Leighton Beard from the Automobile Association of South Africa. Good afternoon, Leighton. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Thank you, Kirshni. Good to be with you.
Leighton, I just want to garner your initial reaction to the President's plans we're hearing today to bring down the legal threshold of blood alcohol for drivers. And do you think this will actually work to bring down the number of road fatalities we see annually?
Well, firstly, I think that bringing down the threshold is not a bad thing, and it's certainly something that we would support if it, at the end of the day, is proven to do exactly what your second question suggests, and that is to bring down the death toll. The AA's point of view has always been not to not drink and drive, but to drink or drive. So we would obviously endorse bringing down the threshold, but we would like to go further and say that if you even had one drink, you shouldn't be driving and you should get somebody else to drive for you. I do think it's a good idea, and it's certainly something we would endorse. I think it comes down to enforcement, Kirshni, and whether this is certainly going to impact on road fatalities or not. And when we look at Transport Month, I think one of the things that we, as the AA, always says is that certainly government needs to do more, but that citizens need to do more as well. And I think we acknowledge that. But when we say government needs to do more, what exactly do we mean? And I think one of the things we do mean is that we need more intensive 365-day law enforcement on all our roads as one of the big steps to reducing fatalities on our roads.
Leighton, we're hearing the Minister saying that 70 people they arrested for drunken driving yesterday alone. Can you tell us why this remains such a major, stubborn problem in the country at this juncture? And, of course, we want to hear from you how this culture of corruption and impunity we're seeing play out in the country contributes to the recklessness or the reckless behavior we see on our roads today.
Yeah. So, I mean, the arrest of 70 people is obviously significant, and hopefully the book is thrown at those people. We would certainly want government and the courts to take the strongest action against those drunk drivers, because they're not only endangering their own but other road users' lives as well. So kudos to the government for those arrests. There is a feeling among South Africans, unfortunately, that because there is a low level of enforcement, they can do what they want and they're going to get away with it. And then there is obviously a group of people who are prepared to take a financial knock in the face of a fine, and who are very happy to break the law because there are in their minds no repercussions. I think those are two very important reasons why people continue to do what they do in terms of breaking the law and driving, and that's something that really does need to be sorted out, and it needs to be seen to be sorted out. So the 70 people that were arrested for drunk driving, I think it's incumbent upon government and the courts to show us exactly what has happened to those 7 people and what the outcomes of their court cases are. And that needs to begin to send a message to other people that, look, you shouldn't do this. Again, this message of, drink or drive. So that's very important. When we look at the fatality statistics in South Africa, we see that around 13,500 people die annually on our roads. Africa is the least motorized continent in the world, yet we have the highest per capita deaths on our roads. And South Africa is a very big contributor to that. And I see that the President has mentioned the UN Decade of Action, which runs from 2011 to 2020. It will be renewed next year, which is fantastic. And obviously South Africa has been a signatory to that, and it's to reduce road deaths by 2020. I think what's concerning for us is that of the 52 African nations, only one country has signed the African Union Charter of Road Safety, and that's Namibia. South Africa hasn't. So I think that should go, that should send a signal that we need to be doing these types of things in order to reduce road deaths. People in our country simply don't adhere to the law. Not all of the people, but a large portion of the people don't adhere to the rules of the road, and they need to begin to do that. And one way to enforce that is through proper law enforcement. And again, I'd like to say that for the AA, that is something that certainly needs to be stepped up.
Leighton, on the point of law enforcement that you mentioned, we can indeed have the very best law enforcement, better police visibility, etc. But it's actually drivers' attitudes and road behavior that's also crucial, isn't it? When it comes to road courtesy, patience, etc. What are your impressions of our road user behavior right now?
Yeah, it's a very complicated question to answer, and I think when you look at the fatality statistics that we have, and not only the fatality statistics, but when you look at the number of crashes that we have, not necessarily fatal crashes, but just all crashes, you begin to develop a picture that South Africans aren't great drivers, and they really don't adhere to the rules of the road. We did a survey in 2017 where we polled motorists and to find out what they believed their expertise level behind the wheel was, and what they felt other drivers' expertise was at the same time. And 80% of people believe that they are excellent drivers and that there's nothing wrong with their driving ability, and that they always adhere to the rules of the road, and that they essentially can't do anything wrong behind the wheel of a car. But at the same time, those 80% of the people believe that 80% of all the other drivers are the ones that are breaking the law and that don't know how to drive properly and that are not courteous and that are breaking all the rules. And certainly those two figures can't gel. You can't have 80% of the people thinking they're good drivers and that the other 80% are the bad drivers. So there is an inherent belief among South African drivers that we are the best and that we're not fallible in any way behind the wheel of the car, and it's simply not true, and it needs to change. And when we look at the numbers and the reasons for the crashes and the fatal crashes, 95% of that is human error. So yes, I think the attitude of South African drivers needs to change, and it needs to change very quickly, and it needs to change dramatically. At the same time, there needs to be an intensification of law enforcement, not only in October, not only over festive periods, but throughout the year, and it needs to be consistent and sustainable, and there needs to be many more law enforcement officers on the road, and that needs to send a signal as well. So it has to be a two-pronged approach, Kirsten.
The AA's Leighton Beer joining us there from our Pretoria studios. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk. Let's move on now.